Attention all mouth breathers. Today's the day I describe the Monkey Cage Conundrum. The deck. The best card in the game. Now what is this card exactly? If you're not a Magic player, you should look up what Magic is. And if you've never seen this card before, well, this is got a DM there. This is a 5 mana artifact that whenever any creature comes into play, doesn't matter if it's yours or your opponent's, you sacrifice the cage and create a number of 2/2 green monkey tokens equal to the mana value of the card. Now, that seems incredibly expensive. Why the hell would you pay 5 mana to play this stupid artifact and then play like another creature and that's it? Well, they forgot the text, if you do. Now this card was made in Mercadian Masks. There were plenty of mistakes in that set. You know what I mean. But essentially, if you have multiple creatures come into play at once, or you respond to the triggered ability, you get more monkeys. So let's say you play Monkey Cage, or get it back from the graveyard, which I'll show you later, and then you play a card such as Living Death or Ghouls Night Out. All those creatures coming into play at once will trigger Monkey Cage. So in order to do that, you're going to have 2 commanders to get all your colors. I run 3 white cards, but then the rest is black, blue, and green. Now the commanders I've chosen is pretty redundant. It is Thrasios and Ravos. Now you can completely ignore these commanders to the point where you can just proxy them. Like, you only play them like once or twice a game. Thrasios' main ability is to be a 2 mana 1/3 that you can sacrifice to village rights, just like Rograk and CDH. And then Ravos has an ability where you can anthem your monkey tokens, so you can beat the shit out of your opponents even harder. But in order to do this, you're going to need some ramp. So, get some ramp. But, doesn't matter what ramp you really grab in this one. I prefer grabbing the lands with Cultivate. This is the actual viable deck for Cultivate. On top of that, since you can ignore your commanders, you can be even more flexible with that ramp. But the main goal is to have a healthy hand size and then to have around 10 lands by the time you want to get Monkey Cage rolling. So you're going to need some card advantage as well. And specifically, most of the cards in here like to discard as well. There's a few mill effects that you'll see, but the main drive of this deck for getting creatures in the graveyard is blue draw and discard spells. So you got your Compulsive Research, your Careful Consideration, your Occult Epiphany as an ambush effect if your opponent's attacking you. After you get a healthy graveyard and around 10 to 12 lands, then you're ready to go. So what do? Well, you're going to need some reanimation spells, and specifically in this deck, you have to have reanimation spells. Well, you don't have to. It's just you get the most monkeys out of this deal. So all my reanimation spells get back multiple creatures at once, except for one, which gets back Monkey Cage, which is even more important sometimes. So you got your spells like Victimize, Ghouls Night Out, and Living Death. You even have Breach the Multiverse, and all those effects are going to get you a lot more monkeys than just a single creature. What? Excuse me. On top of that, this deck is sort of like a chipmunk, so you have persist and undying creatures. I think there's like 4 of them in here. I am looking for a persistent constrictor. Once I find one, I'll update the deck. But you have Woodfall Primus, Puppeteer Click, which is amazing in this deck, and then you have Geralf's Mind Crusher, which mills 5. And look, it actually has a deck now. It has a home. Never thought it would happen, but hey. So these essentially double their mana value if you have a sack outlet. So what you're going to need is Carrion Feeder and maybe like a Phyrexian Plague Lord. Imagine Phyrexians invading Prague. So you got those 2 on top of the Seer and all the Village Rights effects. I have a lot of them in here. And you're going to at least have 1 sack outlet at all time if you play this deck right. And that'll help you with your Monkey Cage triggers, because it's the best card in the game, but every card needs help to be synergistic, even Black Lotus. So what do you do once you have your reanimation spells? Well, you play your reanimation spells, and you get to synergize quite well with your creatures. I've handpicked all of these, and you'll see why later, aka now. So, you have this card called Astral Dragon that you're going to get out. It's going to make 2 more copies of Monkey Cage. Now, unfortunately, these 2 copies won't be able to see the other creatures coming into play, but here's the kicker. They are creatures. They're 3/3 dragons, so your original Monkey Cage is going to see the other 2 coming into play, and those 3 together will net you 30 more 2/2 green monkey tokens on top of the 8 that you got from the Astral Dragon. So the dragon alone gets you 38 monkeys. And then to spice things up, you're going to need this card called Nightmare Shepherd. So if you have that and a sack outlet, well, what you could essentially do is double the mana value of all the creatures coming into play. So you can sack the creature in response to the Monkey Cage, and you get a 1/1 Nightmare token which shares the mana value of the copy. So if you have a Woodfall Primus, you persist it, and then you sack it and get a 1/1 copy. So that is 24 mana value from a single creature. Now what's even better is that you got this card called Gruff Triplets, which can work outside of Nightmare Shepherd. You see, these cards can kind of work on their own. You don't need all of them to get a big trigger. You only need a few. So Gruff Triplets is essentially 18 mana value, and they are pretty good beaters on their own. I mean, if you sack one of them, you're going to get 2 6/6s with Trample, which is pretty good. On top of that, if you get Abdel Adrian can exile all your non-land permanents, including the Monkey Cage, which is pretty important. And you sack him, and he comes back, and then you're going to get all those triggers again. I don't remember if there's actually a loop in here or not. I'll have to find that out when I get back, and I'll add it in later. But Abdel Adrian is a pretty good card in this deck. It's one of the only 3 white cards I run in this deck. It's primarily a Sultai deck with a splash of white. But the backup plan of this deck is that you can just be a classic Reanimator deck on top of committing Grand Theft with your mass reanimation spells through stealing your opponent's stuff. Like, you don't have to play Monkey Cage in this deck. That's what's great about it. A lot of decks that I've seen with the Monkey Cage, they try and make that their main strategy, which props to them. That's like a Flubs player. You just go all in. But, you know, I like to have my cake and eat it too. So I just play a classic Reanimator deck and then have Monkey Cage in there. There's only one tutor as well. It's my foil Vampire tutor, for my Magnum deck. But after that, what else is in this deck that I need to point out? I pretty much covered everything. I'm outside by this reservoir. I'm freezing my ass off. And I didn't write a list down, I just kind of know the deck. So let's think. What else do I need for Monkey Cage to make this the best card in the game? Well, you have your Phyrexian Plague Lord, which is removal. Now, there is quite a decent amount of removal. If you were building this deck, you should add more removal. I should run more. This is an exploratory deck. It's very unrefined. I'm just figuring out what works and what doesn't. If you see my blue removal spell with Foretell, you should probably replace that with like an Assassin's Trophy. Who cares about losing Exile? Just run that instead. But I own all the cards, and I only like proxying if I'm like testing out a deck. I know exactly what I want, but this is like something I'm exploring myself. This Monkey Cage deck. There's something beautiful about that. Just throwing stuff in, not looking up YouTube videos for advice or going on EDH Rec. You're just like, hey, this kind of works, and what can synergize with this? And you're never going to get it right the first time. Even more so with this one. This deck had a hell of a rude awakening when I was building this. But the persistent undying creatures really helped. This deck is really tricky to build, because you can go many ways with Monkey Cage. It's the best card in the game anyways. But I hope you liked this video. And if you have any suggestions for the monkey cage conundrum and how to make even more, I think the maximum I've made was 4,076 monkeys in one trigger. So if you have any ideas to make that even bigger, excluding infinites, I am not counting infinites in this deck. I think the beauty in this deck is that you actually have to do the math to find out how many monkeys you make. And I've done it so many times that I've actually been doing better at like quickly adding everything up, which I know people hate slow turns, so I've managed to reduce mine by about like half the time that people would take to count this all up. So that's pretty cool too. So now that the video is past 10 minutes, I'll probably end it now. So if you've liked this video, you can subscribe and like. You can leave a comment as well for the suggestions for the best card in the game, Monkey Cage. And I'm getting texts. I'll see you guys later. Merry Christmas.
Miguel! Abuelita! What are you doing?